you get those avatars, you're talking about avatars and goofy shit. How are you going to survive?
Yo,
You fucking avatar.
Hey, bro.
you gotta let him finish.
You got it, bro.
So the reason I would advocate many of us, you're creating an avatar, especially if you're in marketing or sales or you're pushing a product, is it allows you to be able to communicate, like it's on my Facebook, my page is Trent Cannon. So it allows you to be able to communicate without actually having to record a video. It's actually being utilized. Hang on before you come off mic again real quick. It's actually being looked at by major sports broadcast networks like ESPN, TNT, and so forth, because instead of Stephen A. Smith coming out and saying breaking news, Baker Mayfield has been traded, it can type in, right, the AI and put that out there, and if Stephen A. Smith is on a plane or whatever, it can be uploaded and he can be on top of it.
Stephen A. Smith won't be on a plane, bro. He'll be replaced. There won't be a Stephen A. Smith. What part of that back then? What do you not understand, bro? It's replacement of it. That's the dumbest shit I ever heard. He's gonna be on the plane. No, the fuck he won't. He'll be unemployed, you silly landlord moron. What the fuck are you doing? This avatar shit, this goofy shit you're coming with, bro. People are losing their careers, they're losing their jobs, they're losing their ability to earn from AI and robotics. And you keep
Let me tell you this, right? Let me say this, man. Let me just say this, right? There are, I gotta take a phone call.
I mean, there's no more to say. You motherfuckers are rooting for your own downfall, like I said earlier. This shit's gonna replace your dumb asses. You're gonna be pushing a cart while AI is laughing at your dumb ass. You got robots laughing at your bum ass pushing a cart because it took your damn job. Fucking idiots, man. I don't understand the logic.
So I just want to say I share your concerns about AI. I do. Because, I mean, he does have a point. By 2030, 40% of current jobs as we know it are going to be completely managed by AI. You guys who have young children, or if you have a child who's about to go into college, be very strategic about
capacity to be more intentional as like the real us, and the being intentional is faking, that can hold us back. And I don't know if y'all are familiar with the concept of masking, but yeah.
James.
Yeah, he's a fun.
It's oftentimes very hard to have those very specific conversations because most people just don't read the material and it's just not of interest to them. But that's partially why I have the view that I have. Don't get me wrong, I'm down to learn, and if I'm wrong, I'm always open to change my mind.
You're probably more knowledgeable than me.
Well, I'm just gonna say like that background informs where I come from.
But I don't think, do you have to practice Nazism to condemn it? No, I know it's a bad argument.
I'm also not a person who's going to condemn an entire religion. I was raised, my grandfather's most important saying was treat other people how you want to be treated. I wouldn't want people dogging on my religion, so I don't do it to other people. If folks want to do it themselves, that's their prerogative. But I just don't operate like that.
Yeah, but that religion is dogging on your religion and my religion. They're saying we're heretics by nature. As someone is
heretics by nature, I don't disagree with you. The point I was trying to make, and I think it's a valid point, is I am not going to judge 1.some billion people based off of people either disliking or being afraid of or feeling endangered by. I just don't condemn entire religions. It's just not my thing. You want to get into like the problems with Islam, in particular like the radical extremist problems, I'll talk to you about that all day. But I'm not going to condemn a billion Muslims as bad people or as someone who like doesn't understand the world. It's not my nature.
I was exactly where you were at almost my entire life, and recently I've come to this conclusion, and that room was really good evidence of it, where when you ask somebody...
I'm going to restart the slide.
When you ask somebody that practices the Islamic faith, if you ask them questions about their quote-unquote prophet, by the way, I'm going to turn replays off. When you ask them about their prophet marrying someone at the age of 6 and having sex with her at the age of 9, there were 7 different people that came through that room that refused to condemn that. They would say things like, "Oh, well, you know, this was a popular practice at the time." And my question to you, Marshall, is like, hey, that was a popular practice at the time. Can you imagine going into a room on Clubhouse talking to people about slavery, and when somebody asks, hey, do you support slavery or do you condemn it? Well, you got to understand it was a popular thing going on in the world, so you can't blame anybody for it. Like, could you imagine making that argument?
No, which is exactly why one of the things I posted up last night on the queue was a book about child marriage in early Islam. Like I did that intentionally so that people could see it, copy it, and read it. Because I don't think, hey, it was popular at the time is the way to go. And to be frank, Roger, the research I've done on it, aside from that book that I found, was that most marrying ages, and I'm not saying people didn't marry younger, but the quote marrying ages around the near and Middle East at the time were like 12 to 15. So marrying a 6-year-old is a fucking problem, bro.
Well, not only that, it's not just a product of the time. Like, I was looking this up while we were in that room. Apparently in Iran, they have a rule on the books that says that you could still marry a girl that's 13, and then if you have the father's permission, they reduce the age to 8 years, 9 months. So, I mean, think about that. You'd still do that legally. It's just crazy. But now that we've got people in here, maybe we should talk about the topic of the room. That might be better.
Yeah, I appreciate you letting me get my kind of sentiments out.
Yeah, no problem. Welcome, Scott. Scott, you did a great job of moderating Gary's room yesterday, although I disagreed with some of what you said, but
I
the
meant
moderation...
I didn't say unprecedented action-wise. I meant unprecedented, I think, temperamentally.
Okay.
Yeah, I didn't mean... You're right, because I think your list of those authoritarian... of the things that transgress the Constitution, I don't disagree with any of that. And I agree with Marshall, too. The executive overreach is just... It's been a problem long before Trump. It's actually a really interesting book by he's an Asian American Yale law professor. I think he's at Yale, called the National Security Constitution. It's all about this topic about executive overreach. It's fantastic.
Yeah. Well, let me start with you, Scott. What do you think of the title of the book?
Yeah, I think it's. I don't know the answer. I mean, I think sexual orientation is a continuum, right? I mean, it's not. I think there are people that are born at different parts of the continuum. I think it's a combination of nature and nurture, right? So I don't think. So I don't think it's I don't think that's an exact answer. I mean, I think it's complex. I think for political reasons, people want to say. I think to say it's not a choice is fair, right? I think people that feel like, hey, I didn't make a conscious choice at like 19. Oh, I'm going to be gay or something. I understand that, right? Like, because this is something that probably has genetic and psychological factors, and you know, which is why it's a sort of dynamic continuum. But I think it's a bold. I don't know that I think it's whole like a thing like gender at birth or biological sex at birth.
Well, what do you think is the definition of gay? Because like, I've thought about this, and
Half of my party.
Well, I'm just wondering how you determine it. Like, if somebody has like a gay thought, does that make them gay, or is it the act that you participate in that makes you gay? And on one hand, I can think, well, we don't call somebody that has suicidal ideation. We don't say that they committed suicide. We don't say that somebody has a homicidal thought as a murderer. You know, and so I wonder if the definition is like, let's say somebody was born with a particular orientation, the behaviors are still going to be a choice, and so there's that. But then if you looked at that particular line of thinking from a slightly different lens, you could then say, okay, well then what if they participate in the behavior but they don't enjoy it? Does that, like, so is it the behavior or is it, you know, the preference?
Yeah, that's interesting. You know, I had a professor when I was in my master's program who wrote a book called The Bible and Homosexual Practice, and it's probably the most comprehensive book on the traditional view. It was written a while ago, around 2000 or something, no, early 2000s maybe. But you know, it's a well-researched book, and he's a quirky guy, but he used the term homosex, not homosexual, for this very reason. He didn't want to raise it. So the middle schooler in you, if you have one of those like me, at about the 8th time you read the term homosex, you just can't stop laughing out loud. But he uses that for the very reason of the issues of what you're saying, like ontologizing homosexual practice, right? He doesn't want to say that homosexual practice is an makes for an ontological identity, right? And so, but I think for you know, for a lot of folks, I think in the gay community, that is the case, right? They do want to say that this is my identity, and so it's become an identity, right? And so then I think. And you can, look, and there's lots of reasons why politically in the sort of movement for gay rights, right, you'd want to say this is biologically fixed, right, something that it's not chosen, like being black or being a woman, right, so then I'm treated the same way in political discussion. So I kind of get that. I just don't know that I don't know that means, I don't know that the fact that this doesn't feel like an arbitrary choice, or even an identitarian choice, the way some of them we might consider. I don't know if that makes it at birth. But.
Do you have any thoughts on this?
Well, I don't have any conclusions on this.
Asked another way, what when you think of this, can you personalize it and ask yourself, do you feel that your sexuality was determined at birth?
My sexual orientation?
Yeah, your sexual orientation. Do you think at birth it was determined? And I won't ask you what it is. I'm just asking if you believe that yours was determined at birth.
Well, I'm straight. It's okay to say. Also, I don't know. I don't think so. I can't recall the first days of my life or the first years of my life. So I certainly can't form an opinion about it. But I think the question is nature versus nurture in this case, and maybe it's both, but I really don't know, Roger. I am also sorry.
Yeah. Nye, what do you think? You think your sexual orientation was determined at birth?
You know, here's the thing. If you had asked me this some years ago, I probably would have said absolutely yes, most especially as it comes to homosexuality. But over the years, especially as we've had people, doing TED Talks and radio hosts, advocating for the MAP people, the MAPs of the world, the pedos, who are claiming that these people were born this way, just like the gays. So now it's a slippery slope. Now I feel divided. I mean, on one hand, I agree that it's not a simple matter of choice, and that, aspects of sexual orientation are present, very early in life. Some so-called scholars would suggest that even possibly before birth, I think sexual orientation, I won't argue against the idea that sexual orientation is influenced by, biology, genetics, hormones, environment, social factors, right? Depending on how religious you are, some folks might believe in reincarnation, and if you were gay in a previous life, you might be inclined to be gay in your new life, right? Not trying to be funny.
Or maybe you try to mix it up the next time.
Exactly, right? So I think there's a lot of, there's a complex interplay here. I won't say that it is a choice 100% of the time, but now that we're, evolving as humans, and you have people saying, well, pedos were born this way. So then the question becomes, well, if pedos were born this way and gays were born this way, were serial killers born this way too? So, and I wouldn't have adopted this ideology, again, maybe 5-10 years ago, but as our social conversations are changing, it's making me think, like, okay, where do we draw the line when it comes to sexual orientation? Is it a matter of choice, or are you born this way? So, I almost feel divided, to be honest with you.
You know what's interesting, Roger? This is like the pre-modern, well, there's lots of pre-modern reasons. I wonder what Caleb would, because there's multiple genders I know, right, in rabbinic thought, right? So, which I'm sure Caleb can comment on. But Aristophanes, in Plato's Republic, yes, the playwright Aristophanes talk about like this concept of soulmates, right? That human beings were originally made of like 4 arms, 4 legs, like, so Zeus divided their souls, right? And so when your soul falls to heaven, you're actually looking for your soulmate, like and they were like male and female halves. And then Aristophanes sort of like theorizes, I think so, and maybe, no, wait, it's in the Symposium, sorry, it's not in the Republic, it's in the Symposium, I think, that some people that have this kind of congenital attraction to the same sex, their halves were actually with this person of the same sex, right? Generally God, they're talking about guys generally in the Symposium, but that their soul is not male-female, but male-male, so that's why they're looking for male sexual union. So, I don't know, not that that's very scientific, I think it's, Aristophanes, but...
The title, I do not think it's determined by birth. I think that I saw a study done by, I think it was like the Archives of Sexual Behavior in like the early 2000s, show that 40% of gay men experienced sexual abuse in childhood compared to 10% in heterosexual men. And then on top of that, I also saw, like, I think it was like I forget, like, I'm pretty sure like that number has pretty much been consistent since that early 2000. And then the other thing that I think about is that you guys remember the Alex Jones, They're Turning the Frogs Gay, which is like a funny meme, but it's also true, like that, I forget, what was it called, like, wasn't it like, I forget, like the chemical in the water that was actually, it took, because what they actually did was they took African like claw frogs or whatever they're called, and they studied through the EPA did this as well, showed that in high doses of concentration in this water supply would turn the sex of these male African frogs and make them super effeminate, and that type of chemicals in our drinking water to this day. So I also wonder, like, does that play a portion? I think a lot of, I think a lot of environmental factors, of course, how you grow up. But I think sexual abuse as a child, and I think, possible chemicals in different functionalities in our human life could potentially determine your, the course of your, I guess, sexual orientation. So, no, there's no gay gene, so.
Well, whether there is a gay gene or isn't a gay gene, I think that when it comes to sexual orientation, there's going to be things that influence this stuff. What you're attracted to. I always thought it was interesting where, if you think about the way that men, have their intimate moments when they're homosexual, it's an act, whether oral or anal, it's an act that they could have done heterosexually. So it's not the act itself that they're drawn to. It seems to be they're drawn to. It could be just that person. There's something about that person they're drawn to, or it could be the fact that they're just attracted to their same sex. And I don't fully understand it. So this is one of those rooms where you're not going to get a lot of answers or hard opinions from me. I think the biggest point is that I would say that even if it's a lifestyle that you wouldn't participate in, maybe even perhaps you'd go as far as to say it's repugnant, I definitely think it's something that we should talk about, also weaving into this conversation, protecting the rights for people to freely, participate in whatever consensual adult sexual relations they would choose. But I don't want to get too far off topic there. Caleb, do you want to jump in?
Yeah, I think I'm mostly with the group. I think it's probably a combination of things in terms of like the absolute answer to the question. Why does the question matter? Well, you just sort of mentioned it matters socially. It matters policy-wise, morally, especially in the world of like identitarian politics, where people want to say, I am this thing, and you can't take away my amness, my isness of that thing. So protection of rights, access to all kinds of things, inclusion, diversity, whatever you want to say, right? In the world of that, I think there's probably motivations to say, whichever side of that conversation you're on, it strikes me that there's probably motivations for you to want to say that it's designated at birth, and probably those who are motivated to say that it isn't, for the social implication of it all.
Yeah, I think that's good. Sarah, you came off mic. Do you want to jump in?
I just was gonna say, now that we're protecting everybody's right, can we open the chat and protect our chatters' right?
The chat has been liberated.
You can all now occupy the chat.
Yeah, and I do agree with Caleb that yeah, like, without a doubt, this like, if I'm against homosexuality because I think it's pretty gay, then yeah, I'm gonna think that's not determined at birth. And if you are for homosexuality and you think it's pretty cool, then yeah, you're gonna be like, oh no, it is determined at birth. But I think there is more like statistics backing up that's probably not determined at birth. It's probably way more environmental. But I guess until they figure out what gene causes it, what hormonal change shifts at birth causes it. But it kind of like what Mojo was saying, or Roger was saying, I don't know what he's going by right now, but which is that, like, like, think about it, like, it kind of makes sense if you're sexually abused as a child. It's really, really sad that, not trying to take away from what actually happens, but like your first ever sexual interaction is with a man, right? And then after that, and let's say even made you feel good as a child, which is again very, very bad because that's a real thing, and children get exposed and exploited. But again, that's your first ever sexual interaction. You might always crave that sexual interaction for the rest of your life, and so I feel like that is a really big determining factor. As a child, is what you are predisposed to before you're like a consenting adult. Even maybe like pornography. Like, what if your ever first porn is gay? Will you then just be attracted? Like, I don't know. But.
So, Keegan, can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
Do you think that the answer to the when it's determined makes any difference about protection of rights?
Not when it's determined, but I think that they deserve like the same rights as everyone.
Like everybody deserves all the same rights, right?
No, I don't believe that.
Oh, you don't believe that? Okay.
No, like I don't believe like they should like adopt children.
You don't think gay people should have the rights to be parents?
No.
Okay, so you're a bigot, right?
Roger, I'm wondering, I have a question for you politically. Do you think that Pete Buttigieg would have better political prospects if he came out as a non-versatile top?
I think there's a lot of things that go into people's preference of who they would elect. I think that there's probably sexual orientations that in a particular area of the country, maybe even just your neighborhood or your county, that people would weight that very heavily. I can also see, choosing to vote against somebody that happens to be homosexual, but it has nothing to do with their sexuality. For example, Buttigieg. I would never vote for him. I wouldn't vote for him to be dog catcher. But my reason for that is I don't like his position on when it comes to gun rights. And so, but I think a lot of people, if you were to come out and say, hey, I would never vote for that guy, I think he would be awful. Even if you didn't mention sexual orientation, much like the race and gender thing, people would say, oh, you're probably against that. But before we get too deep into that, I want to interrogate this thing that Keegan had said. Keegan said that he doesn't believe that if you're homosexual that you should have rights to adopt. And I'm just kind of curious, like, why would you, like, what is your reason for that?
Yeah, I think that number one is if they were adopting older kids in the foster care system, I maybe could be like, hey, maybe I don't think it's ethical, but like those kids are better off probably in a gay household than in foster care, right? But what actually is tend to happen is that they have they get priority over heterosexual parents for newborn adoption, and we don't have a problem in America. We don't have a problem with newborns being adopted. So I don't believe that newborns. I think newborns have the right to a heterosexual household. Maybe I would almost say that maybe I would be okay with it if we gave priority to heterosexual couples first, and if there's any newborns left, then they could maybe. But again, I also think that number one is I think you have a right to a heterosexual couple because a father and a mother. And also I have the same opinion for single parents. Single parents shouldn't adopt either. Shouldn't be allowed to adopt either. But I've as a parent myself, I've read a lot of parenting books, and they've done so many studies of how fathers and mothers parent completely differently. Fathers are much more risk takers. They do actually rough and tumble play, as they call it, and they allow.
Are you talking about Jordan Peterson's take on this?
No, not Jordan. This is a book.
Because that's the exact term that he refers to when he talks about this.
Well, he must be reading off the study. It's a study done in 2021, which it's called the RTP study, which is called the Rough and Tumble Physical Play Study, which I'm guessing I bet he's just referring to. Which I bet a lot of parenting books refer to it because it's supposed to share what a father should do and what a mother should do. But they've done studies on how fathers are much more risk takers, right? They allow their children to really experiment what they're able to do with their bodies as children, while mothers tend to be much more compassionate. They tend to teach their children about emotional awareness. Actually, they show that communication styles, when a mother teaches their kids majority of the communication styles for the first 12 months, they tend to have much better communication styles than if the father taught the child for the first 12 months, right? So I think that these things, I mean, biologically, we were made to have children heterosexually, and I think that there's also biologically a course of how those children are supposed to be raised biologically. If we change that course just because of preference, it's just not what I agree with. I think it's unethical.
Well, but you didn't. Okay, you gave me a lot of information, but you didn't answer the question. Like, what do you like? What is your reasoning for why you think this is bad? I mean, you talked about
they don't make good parents. They can't be good parents because
they can't be.
They're not opposite sex. They only can bring one aspect of parenting to the child. Is my point.
Can I ask
If two fathers.
You can ask a question, but it better be on this particular thread.
Exactly on this. That he says they won't see one type of parent. But does that mean we're gonna ban single parents? Because if you're raised by a single parent, you're only seeing one type of parenting too. If one of your parents die, it's the same thing. You only see one type of parent.
Yeah. As I stated before, number one is, again, this is about adoption. This is about the choice to put a child into a home that isn't, again, the natural way of having a child, which is through a heterosexual couple. So if a single parent wanted to adopt, I can't make people not divorce or widow happen. I can't determine that. But what we can determine is when children get adopted and who they get adopted by.
But
a single parent shouldn't be.
We can't control. As a society, we can't control when heterosexual people that don't love each other decide to have sex. A pregnancy occurs, a child is born, and then you have two people that may or may not be in a relationship, and then so now you have a single mother. You could have a father that doesn't want to be involved. I would make the argument. This is the very, very minimum argument that I think in terms of parenting and what would make a good parent would start with a few basic things, like, number one, are you committed to raising the child? Because there's people that are heterosexual that are not committed to doing that. That becomes problematic. Do you have the resources, or are you willing to work your butt off to gain the resources to be able to adequately support this child? And then thirdly, are you going to provide a safe environment that provides shelter, food, which ties into this whole resource thing, although the resource is a little broader in my mind, because it has to do with, will you commit your time to reading about books on how to raise a child, how to deal with difficult situations. I guess those are the things that I would look for in a good parent, and I don't think sexual orientation would give you an inkling of what the answer to that is. And furthermore, if I were looking at the adoption system, the foster system, and all of the different ways that we care for children that kind of don't have the luxury of having two parents in the home, I don't. By the time you sift through all of the most important factors, which you may never find the most ideal parenting situation, you just have to get the best that you can. I don't know, even if you were completely bigoted towards a particular sexual orientation, I would have to think that would be one of the lowest priorities in comparison to, are you going to love the child, or are you committed to raising the child, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I don't know. I think that maybe your thoughts on this are, I don't want to go as far as Caleb was saying, but I want him in this conversation for sure, to say that this means that you are bigoted, but certainly disallowing people to have the right to adopt, in policy, that would be, discriminatory. But you can discriminate without being a bigot if you had logical explanations as to why you think there's a material difference. But I just don't think that, it sounds to me like you believe that somebody's sexual orientation leads them to being a bad parent. And
No, I'm not a bad parent. I don't want to get you wrong here. I'm not saying they're a bad parent. I'm saying they physically, biologically, do not parent the same as the opposite sex. They just don't.
Who's to say that's a bad thing?
Because they've done studies on how that's a bad thing. How both mothers and fathers bring completely different aspects. Like the rough and tumble study that they done in both 2015 and I think they did it again in 2018, just to see if they got the same results, which they tended to do, showed less likely chance of forming aggression as toddlers. Right? They had reduced aggression, and also it regulated their emotions better. Right, with this rough and tumble play. Again, it also created risk taking into their mind, and now in allowing that to grow. That's something that mothers that's something that two lesbian parents. Again, women don't want to do that because they have as they've shown in studies, that they tend to just not do that because they're just much more compassionate human beings. They don't want to think that they're going to hurt their child at all. They're just all about safety rather than risk taking. But some of goes. But I want to make it clear, they're not bad parents. They just can't be a parent from the opposite sex.
Sorry, Mojo, may I ask Keegan a question?
Yeah, jump on in, brother.
So, Keegan, the question I want to ask you, what if they were a single parent? Are you saying that that child cannot be a well-rounded individual? If they were in a single parent household not of their own making?
Well, again, okay, I'm sorry. You finish.
Yeah, there's an African proverb, and it says it takes a whole village to raise a child, not just two parents, and you can get many different influences and many contributions from your uncles, your aunts, and those that you consider to be your uncles and aunts. It takes a whole community to raise a child, not just two parents. So that single parent child in that single parent household, are you saying they're not well-rounded?
Again, there can always be exceptions to the rule, but that's the same thing as me being should we just have all children be in single parent households? We all understand that statistics show that children in single parent households don't do well the majority of the time. The majority, well over the majority. They're 3.5 times more likely to experience poverty. They're I think they're 2 times more likely to spend time in prison. These are bad statistics for single parenthood households. And I'm not saying, again, we can't make it illegal for people to have sex, have children out of wedlock, split up. I guess you can do that in a weird. I'm not trying to do that. I'm just saying that for adoption, when we're saying, hey, we're going to put a child into homes, I would say, especially in newborns. Again, you can debate me on. I would have more of an ethical problem with children above the age of a toddler age, but newborn up to 2 years old, we don't have a placement crisis when it comes to that. I think there's 38 parents waiting for every newborn being born for adoption, right? We have a wait list. Continue.
Sorry, Keegan, I didn't mean to interrupt you. Just let me know when I can chime in.
No, you
so, Keegan, yeah, the point I wanted to make was obviously most heteronormative scenarios where there's two parents, they get together, have a child, there's no verification or scrutinization taken if they are fit parents. However, when there are, lesbian and gay parents, they have to go through far more many checks. I would say, I'm assuming that every country's
processes are the same, but they do, on average, go through far more many checks to see that they are competent parents and they have the means to provide for that child. I would say it's a far safer bet that in most circumstances, not all, I have to emphasize that they would actually be the far better parent than a guy and a girl that got together and the girl got pregnant. So I don't understand how you can just say that gay parents are not just as good, or may, in some cases, and I emphasize some cases, could actually be far better. Because they've gone through so many processes to actually demonstrate to whichever authorities have demonstrate that they can be.
Well, this is the last thing I'll say, and I don't want to, again, I'm not trying to take Roger's stage and center myself, but I understand what you guys are just trying to do, trying to get my viewpoint. Again, we're talking about adoption, right? The same thing with the gay couple and heterosexual couple, they have to be financially stable if you're going to adopt a newborn in this country. You go through a whole process. My parents, we adopted. They adopted children to our family. I've seen the process firsthand. They've been a part of organizations for my whole life. I've seen it. So yes, the newborn situation, the heterosexual couple is a better couple on paper than the homosexual couple, without a doubt. And in this country, we're giving priority to homosexual.
So Keegan, no, hold on. So Keegan, you keep repeating this, but there's a study by let me get it correct. American Academy of Pediatrics that says that there's no difference in cognitive, social, or emotional development between children raised by same-sex or opposite-sex couples. My question for you is, because you keep going back to fathers and mothers parent differently. Well, if you got 100 fathers and line them up, they're not all going to have the same parenting style. If you lined up 100 mothers, they wouldn't all have the same parenting style. So I think there's a fallacy and just a fatal fundamental flaw in I won't even call it logic, because I don't think that you're approaching this from a logical perspective. If your genuine concern is you want these children to have the best parents, then why wouldn't we then go and identify the tools and the tactics used by great parents, and then we could ask ourselves, well, who's more likely to deliver on that? And I think you would be hard to convince anybody that simply having a sexual orientation that's other than heterosexual, that somehow that means that the people wouldn't be able to optimize parent skill.
Can I quickly chime in?
Well, I wanted Keegan to respond to that, and then absolutely, Dummy, I'd love for you.
Yeah, again, I'll just continue to reiterate that I think that we all understand that we all biologically as sex, as genders, just completely different. We fundamentally do different things, and this is studies that they've just done on just opposite sex. For many more years than any homosexual studies that you guys can find. Like they've done it for decades and decades. But
Keegan, you're aware that there are parents, like if we were to just isolate and look at heterosexual parents, if we were to look at the thing that you're prioritizing, heterosexual two-person household, which by the way, that is a two-person household, a father and a mother. If you were to ask me, is that the most ideal? I would say I would probably concur, simply because it would be, well, provided that it's their birth parents, right? I would say that would typically be advantageous. However, there's caveats to that. What if the father is abusive? What if the mother is an addict?
Can I add another real quick?
I would like to speak, though.
Just on this point, 10 seconds. The phenomenon of the two-parent household is actually quite modern and new in the history of human development. We didn't live in single-family households. We lived in multi-generational households, which goes back to Rumer's point about, people were raised by grandparents and parents and older siblings and, right? So this idea of the natural ways to heterosexual parents is kind of a historical inaccurate.
Well, it's just it's just the opposite sexes. Like you could convince me that a polyamorous relationship between two men and a woman, but the two men are attracted to each other, but one man's bi and he likes a woman. Whatever, this world's crazy. I would be more in favor. I would say that polyamorous relationships should be able to adopt because it's literally just based off of the natural instincts that you have biologically as a man and as a woman are completely different. This is done by every single study, and so my opinion, and opinion that has been formed based off of studies. I understand that Roger stated a study that I'll definitely look at after this, but is that they generally, on the majority, behave differently and parent differently, and it's beneficial to the child to have both parents.
Well, I would like to bring you some studies actually, right? Because you're talking about studies and behavioral issues. When it comes to marriages, men gay couples tend to divorce and have a better structural household than lesbian gays or straight couples, because the divorce rate is only about 25% versus straight couples is 50 and lesbians is about 75-80%. When it comes to financial issues, gay households tend to have way more money than straight couples or lesbian couples. So when it comes to all these studies, right there alone, you have a better structure of life for the child to be adopted to, right? So what studies are you talking about? I'm just curious.
Yeah, I mean, I do. You want to just come into the conversation late. Again, in the United States, if you're adopting a newborn, they look at your financial records, they make sure you're financially stable. You're just talking about, I understand the, hey, you're born into if you're talking about every single heterosexual couple, every single married heterosexual couple, that includes a lot of people, gay people, when they adopt a child, they have to be financially stable, right? And so, just like heterosexual couples, when they adopt a newborn, they have to be financially stable. So, when just looking at adoption, it's pretty much even, and then now you're just talking about whether or not the aspects of having two men adopt, let's say, a daughter, how would they raise her compared to a mother and a father? And I would say it's just drastically different, and it's been shown.
Well, if I can just say really quickly, I understand a lot of Keegan's points, but I also kind of want to highlight the fact that a lot of these adoption agencies or child protective services, when they take these children out of homes where mothers give up their babies for adoption, as we know, oftentimes they're not put into healthy environments. Oftentimes these children get placed in abusive homes. We've heard numerous reports over the years, whether these homes are, led by straight couples or gay couples. I just wish we had a better vetting process in place. I don't care where the child goes, if it's a gay couple, straight couple, single couple. I want to get more children out of the system because the system is not healthy for these kids. And then we have to think about if they're in adoption homes, once they turn 18 and they age out of the system, especially the foster care system, they're put on the street. And they're put on the street, they don't have any support, they don't have any resources. Oftentimes they might have to turn to drugs, homelessness. They're not given a proper head start in life if they don't have some sort of, foundation. So I just wish we had a better vetting process in place for anybody that wants to adopt. I understand that money is important, but I also feel like if we can put these kids in homes that are loving and supportive, for me, that's ideal. I don't care if the parents are gay, straight, or if it's a single couple. If you can provide for that child and love that child and give that child a good start in life so that when they get older, they know how to navigate the world. And if they fall down a little bit, they can fall back home, right? I think that's important, not the sexuality of the people that are raising them.
Here's my question, and because this becomes more of an ethical debate, I really want to hear from Roger. Maybe he can give me his point of view. So again, if we have no problem, let people be based off of who they love, would anyone have a problem if two sisters who were sexually active with each other incest, can't produce children because they're gay, would you guys first of all be okay with them getting married? And then a secondary question would be, are you guys okay with them adopting?
That's illegal in every state of the country.
I'm asking you an
ethical question. Yeah. So here's my perspective on marriage. If that was the question. Why do we? I would back it up. I don't believe that people should have to submit an application to get a license to be married. I don't think that the government should make a decision on who can or cannot get married. I think that if somebody, look, I would probably not attend a wedding between two sisters. I think that would just be beyond my level of comprehension. I think I would probably stay away from that one. But I think that marriage, I think we put it in the hands of the wrong people. I think that George and Martha Washington, for example, didn't have a marriage license, and they were able to marry. I think the mere fact that we say you have to go to the government to get their blessing to be married, marriage to me seems like a individual commitment that people make, but ceremonially, it's more of a religious ceremony in which there's there's cultural and religious belief that's tied into this. I would say that if the church that you attend has allows for it, and you are in a consensual relationship and you want to get married, then go ahead. But I don't think there should be any advantages tax-wise of getting married or remaining single. I just think that the entire institution of marriage, the way that we do it here in this country, where the government determines who is and recognizes who is or isn't married, is the problem. Does that mean that I support incest? No. I also cringe at that idea. And I'll explain why if you guys care, but I think it's, for most people, it's self.
Roger, I'm wondering, like, what do you do with, like, part of the reason is that marriage is a civil contract, right? And so when, church and state and pre-modern societies or religion in your culture were not as delineated, this wasn't a big deal. But now, you might want to get married in a religious ceremony or whatever. It's weird because you get married in a religious ceremony, but the state solemnizes it so that there are legal protections around it, right? So how would you deal with if you didn't have the state issuing marriage licenses, how do you establish who's legally married and then who gets when the divorces and the child, my understanding is part of the reason for the state, offering, giving marriage licenses and stuff is so that you have because the state deals with legal ramifications when you get divorced very often, right?
So Scott, if what you're looking for is a contract, why would you have to be married to enter into a contract? You could do that with just simply, drafting up paperwork and getting it notarized.
Yeah, we could do that. That would be an acceptable alternative. That basically, that instead of marriage, you had some sort of civil contract that people wanted to do in addition to whatever private communities they had solemnizing their relationship. They're saying, okay, in addition to, the synagogue or church says we're going to add these legal public connotations.
Yeah. So here's what's interesting to me is in this entire conversation when it went into adoption, right? That was like the first thing that people said of why homosexuality, what the question was, should homosexuals have the same rights that heterosexuals have? I think the answer to that is yes. I also think that there's a big difference between rights and privileges, and I think we should think about that. I'm not a big believer in the idea that look, if somebody else has to do something for you that it's not really a right, rights are these things that were granted to us by our Creator, right? The Creator, gives us life, and I think that most societies believe in the sanctity of life. Although we had a conversation last night with a death cult that didn't. But where I'm at with this is that it seems like the people that are most against adoption by homosexuals to adopt children, it seems like those people are not necessarily coming at this from a logical perspective. They could say things like, "Oh, well, fathers, and mothers parent differently." Well, if what you're worried about is different parenting skills or different parenting styles, then I think we should look at heterosexual couples and we should inquire more about parenting skill, parenting styles. If that's the scrutiny that we're going to put on it, and then that could lead us into some really interesting places where if you were going to try to break down demographic information, we would then look at what demographic information helps us to predict better outcomes, whether it's socially or in their career or just being happy in general. I think that's a good measurement. I think maybe it's an underrated measurement. Most people, like parents, they'll brag and they'll say, "Oh, my kid is doing so good. They've got this successful career." And I don't think that's a bad thing. I think that's a really good thing. But what if that same kid had a great career but was miserable and it was just an unhappy, depressed person, which happens quite a bit? I personally think happiness and just being, navigating the world where you've got a good perspective that's healthy about yourself and your relationships. And so I just don't see any data, and if somebody wants to point it to me, that suggests that we should even consider looking at orientation. And again, if you showed me concrete examples that a high percentage of children raised by homosexuals had bad outcomes, before I would even take that data and say, "Ooh, we should restrict that," I would want to compare that to like for like incomes and with heterosexuals and see if that data even matters. And again, it's just my observation, but it seems like all the people that think that homosexuals shouldn't adopt kids, and even the ones that are using this example that, a father and a mother have different parenting skills, if you were to peel that onion back further, I would guess that 99.99%, again, this would be my guess, I'd be willing to wager that those same people making that argument are all heterosexual and have negative views of gays in general.
Well, and Roger, I'll ask this question one more time. Because you know what? I'll just make the ethical question, because I like to see how people determine, why they believe what they believe. And of course, just so everyone understands where I'm coming from, I am a Presbyterian Christian. I do not believe in homosexuality. As a marriage, I think it's sinful. So probably every single aspect of their life, I'm going to consider sinful, of course. But question to the room, question to Roger, of course, as he's the moderator. If again, a sister and a sister in a sexual relationship as an incest, which I understand is illegal, I'm just asking the ethical question, not the legal question. Would we, if they were financially stable, in a healthy relationship, no abuse, they love children, the same way as two gay women would love a child, would we allow them to adopt? And if not, I want to know why.
I would say this. I would accept. I'm not saying I would be comfortable with, but I would accept two sisters wanting to raise a family. One of them would be the legally adopted parent, and the other one would just be the parent that lives in the house. The ethical considerations or my ethical problems with their sexual relationship don't necessarily say anything about their capacity for being good parents.
I don't know. I feel like if you're willing to diddle your sister, you have no boundaries. What will you do to the damn kids?
But we can't know that. That's the thing with ignorance. In other words, we're making assumptions based on one set of behaviors and saying that translates to all other kinds of behaviors. I'm not sure that that's right. Then parents who smoke shouldn't be allowed to adopt children either. Right? Like, how far do you want to extend it?
I don't know. Because a lot of things. We're comparing cigarette smoking to incest, though?
But I'm comparing, no, because I'm comparing them on a spectrum, right? In other words, if we're saying some behavior is dangerous, where do you draw the line? And a lot of things are a matter of degrees, right? So I think Keaton's question is, in the abstract, malformed, because he's not asking about degrees, he's just asking about like one. I would put the question back on Keaton. Where would you draw the line about harmful things that you might see in a family, and would you further restrict adoption rights because of those things like smoking or alcoholism or overeating or obesity? Where would you draw the line?
See, this is where it becomes very, very fun. I said I would be willing to have this type of discussion, which is like maybe it's not like a full-on restriction and making it illegal, but rather a priority list. Because we don't do that right now in this nation, right? There's not a priority list. There's not a list that. Well, no, you have to fit a certain number for newborns. You have to fit a certain number of legal standards.
Do you have kids? Yes. God help them. Yes. God help them. Because I think you're raising them to be. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. God help all the children. God help all the children.
Okay. Well, anyways, which is that, like, I think that, not even just based on like your financial standpoint, which is already a standpoint that you have to hit to adopt a newborn. You have to be, you have to hit certain parameters that CPS will look to, or adoption agencies will look into. But yeah, I mean, looking to even further, do you smoke in the house? Is there any form of drug abuse or like you're absolutely right. Like, should we have a priority list of people who, like, hey, if you're a heterosexual couple, financially well off, no forms of alcoholism, no forms of smoking in the house, physically in shape, these things, like, should they have a priority? I would say, yeah, without doubt. Maybe there is a future, maybe it is a priority list rather than just like, if you just hit these checklists, anyone can.
So why would you, in the case, so what makes adoption different than biological birthing? Why wouldn't you say, right, the doctors and hospitals and things shouldn't permit their patients to get pregnant, right? We should vasectomize all smokers, right? Like, so that, right, if we're going to restrict it to, there's an inconsistency there, right? Because you're allowing for bad heterosexual parents just by the mere to the fact that they're heterosexual, but you're not willing to have kids who need to be adopted. So what's the distinction?
Well, again, it's not that kids need, like, I don't know if you know this, I think the last time I saw it was 38 to 1 newborn, meaning that there's 38 parents to every one newborn. There's a massive wait list in this country for newborns. That's why many get surrogacy, because they rather want to wait for it. So
I have a question that might be irrelevant. What percentage of parents that are trying to adopt, hetero, are unable to have kids on their own?
Lots.
Right. So I think that itself is the reason why they should take priority. There's nothing that's stopping the other group. having this other one if they like. I mean, I get why they wouldn't if that's, you know, what they're striving to, but.
Well, and as Mojo said in the beginning argument, he said this, I forget why he said this, but I mean, I agree with it, which is that you have God-given rights. When you are born, you are just given. And one of those rights, which is like a privilege, is the right to be able to have a child, to bear a child, and then also again to a man to inseminate a woman to have her bear a child. So like that's a God-given right. When you're gay, you've given away that privilege, right? I think you just don't get that privilege.
Why?
Because you can't do it. You don't. I mean, I guess.
Of course you can. There's no biological restriction just because I'm gay. No, absolutely not. There is no technical restriction of me activating that right just because I'm gay.
In a homosexual relationship between two men, there is. That's what I'm saying. I guess you could get.
No, but you're missing the point. I guess you're missing the point.
Then what's the argument?
That's exactly right.
Then why not do that and let couples that cannot have kids adopt and let a child have a traditional household?
Why wouldn't we also say infertile couples then can't have kids?
That's right. Because they gave away their right.
Or they're just not selected. They don't have the entourage.
That's right. They're not selected. So this is just Calvinism. This is all this is.
No, let's not insult Calvinism. Let's not talk about Presbyterian, Caleb. That's an insult to Calvinists.
We could go that route, but then the gays can adopt either. They're not selected either.
I mean, I don't see anything wrong with gay people adopting children.
And Marshall's a Presbyterian. Somebody just said that they were against it because they're Presbyterian, and Marshall's a good Presbyterian.
I have a different view. I support the ability to be married. I don't care whether they're gay or lesbian or transgender, it doesn't matter to me. I go to a church, however, that says if you're gay, you can come to our church, you can't be in leadership, and we won't marry you. And that's about where I stand religiously on it. I think it is practically, there's nothing that says there's nothing to indicate gay people can't adopt children and raise them in perfectly good homes. It's happened for the United States for at least 80 or so, well, not 80, at least like 20 or so years, and produce bad side effects. The other piece is gays have been around as long as we've been on this earth. Alexander the Great's most fearsome cavalry troop was called the Pagan Cavalry, and it had 2,000 men in it, and they were all gay. Every single one of them. So gayness doesn't take away. I'm not asking people.
Alexander's crew was all gay.
I very much am with Roger. I don't think the state needs to be involved. I think when we punish what goes on between two consenting adults who have liberty and freedom, then we're sticking our noses where it really doesn't belong. I realize, Keegan, you don't agree with that, but that's my ridiculous view.
Yeah,
I mean,
I make the argument that when people say if it's just two consenting adults, then everyone should be okay with incest. Incest should not be, other than producing gay incest, and then maybe if you're heterosexual incest, you just have to get a vasectomy or tie your tubes.
Yeah, but everyone think gay people aren't the same.
Well, why not? They're two consenting adults. I'm just really confused.
Well, hold on, Keegan, hold on, Keegan, are you genuinely confused by it? Because you're
yes, I think it's a contradiction. I think it's a contradiction.
Well,
do this.
Well, I don't see a contradiction of people to be able to look at two separate issues and to be able to feel different ways about these two separate things. I think that there's a couple of questions here. First of all, do you believe that homosexuality and incest are you think that those are morally and ethically just the same thing? That's your take?
Yeah, it's sexual immorality.
Got it. Well, there's a lot of sexual immorality, right? Jacking off is sexually immoral, depending on the teachings that you follow. And so I guess my question is if we're going to get so hell bent, no pun intended, on the idea of what is sexually moral, right? Then I think, what about people that have sex out of wedlock? Do you feel the same way about them as you do about people that commit incest?
Yes. I mean, yeah. I mean, it's the same sexual morality. Now jacking off actually is debated. It can be debatable, but these three things that you labeled other than that are not debatable among the church.
Got it. So it's your belief that we should put incest and homosexuality and sex before marriage all in the same bucket because of a religious belief that you hold?
No, I'm asking. I'm saying I'm basing my ethical understanding of sexual morality as a religious understanding. I'm asking other people how, when they say it's two consenting adults, how are they ethically getting to that position when they're against incest?
That's how.
And if someone can get, I mean, other than the government, of course, or how society deems it's,
Also, Darren, I'm saying, when in one relationship, you can reproduce children that are all fucked up, i.e. King Tut and his kids.
I'm saying, let's say gay incest. I'm not even saying heterosexual incest. Let's say gay incest. Why would you be against gay incest? Ethically.
Because it's illegal. Like, I'm not having
because the ethical,
think the same moral way as you do about it. If it were legal, it would be a different conversation. It is not, in fact, legal unless you are in the state of Alabama, in which case you can still marry and fuck your first cousin, which is disgusting.
the ethics here, Kagan, have to do with that, right? The symmetry breaker is that they're related, they're family members, right? That's the ethical breaker of the logjam, right? And that's the difference. And that's where you make that ethical, people might make that ethical determination. But I think Roger is right to point out that the consenting adult umbrella doesn't cover all the same kinds of sexual relationships. And it would be kind of a mistake to consider sex before marriage and incest to be of similar moral weight or similar moral transgression.
Well, I could just make a completely new argument, which is that the two sisters who grew up in completely different households never knew each other, but knew that they were sisters, and then they were consenting adults and wanted to get married. Would anyone be ethically opposed to that? And at the end of the day, what I realized is a lot of people who believe just that two consenting adults can move in any type of engagement that they want to be in always tend to just go, yeah, I'm for incest at this point. Which then makes me.
That's a straw
On
man.
a Thursday afternoon, these fucking people are debating incest.
No, but that's a huge straw man.
Gay marriage was legalized in 2013, and you haven't gotten people saying, let's fuck horses.
I understand. I'm just asking people on an ethical basis, not on a legal basis.
The problem is, actually, the problem, Keegan, is that your ethics, and it's not a problem that you have ethics informed by religion, but you think that all ethics, right, that the only ethical framework is religious, and that's a problem here because it's not the only ethical framework. So when you ask about ethics, you think you're asking something that's like agreed upon. You think you're asking something that's like widely agreed upon or common sense, and it just isn't.
No, I understand that ethics can be determined by society and environmental. My point is that I think that ethical standards that are determined by society and environmental completely shift through the times. That's why in 2001 it was commonly known that gay marriage was not a thing and was not accepted in almost every single Western nation. And then post 2001 it became much more common. And even gay adoption wasn't even a thing for the last 20 years, or before 20 years ago. So it's like, these things just shift so quickly, and then to determine that someone was a bigot because they haven't shifted with society, I think it's just astronomical.
I would 20 years after slavery, if you were to say that you were still in favor of slavery, I'd call you a bigot too.
But here's the thing,
Catch up. Time to catch up.
But think about like Presbyterians, like Quakers, right, which is what my family was growing up. Quakers were completely against slavery. They were ones who were abolitionists, right? That's why when I say that, like, if you allow society to determine your ethics, you are the one who usually probably supported slavery. You're the one who probably who just allows us to shift.
Your ethical framework is entirely flawed. Your base assumption is one that doesn't correlate. The issue with incest is that you're family. That's the issue. Caleb was right.
But why is it your family? Why is it the issue that you're not saying anything other than nothing? You're saying that.
No, I'm being very specific. You just don't like the specificness, which is fine.
Why would it be a problem with my family? Can somebody explain why that would be the problem? Again, I am not for incest. I want to make that very clear. I'm against incest in all form of fashion. But if you're saying the problem is because of your family,
the answer is because it's your family. You don't fuck your family. There is a historical norm that you don't fuck your family. If you do, you end up like some of the Egyptian dynasties. That's the issue. There's been an admonition against incest for thousands of years. And it's because you're fucking your family, right? The reason I think your framework is flawed is because you're equating that societal and historical issue with two people who aren't related to each other but are the same sex getting married. There is no issue in society for that. Now, there was an issue in the 40s, certainly, but it was an issue of people not being out. It didn't mean people weren't gay. Again, gay people have been here for thousands of years. Like it's not like
after thousands of years they weren't accepted. I'm confused.
It's not like we're turning people gay with the phones, for example, right? Like sometimes that happens. It is what it is. It's been on the planet for a long time. Nobody in this conversation is asking you to morally accept that as a religious issue. We're simply saying the two don't equate. Maybe there is a better example we might be able to use. Could you think of one that is maybe more applicable?
Well, again, you're talking about reproduction. The reason why society was against incest, which actually society wasn't against incest for thousands of years. Look at every single king and monarchy were mostly incest, and society looked for that. And that actually wealthier
public didn't practice incest.
No, that's not true. Wealthier families would perform incest to be like the monarch. The poor families
and let's be real, royal families and the rich were not very much in antiquity. They simply weren't.
I understand. I'm just trying to relay that your point's flawed. Which number one is that homosexuality can exist for thousands of years, but was not a societal acceptance for thousands of years. It's still not a majority acceptance in the world. It's only accepted in the West.
It's not accepted in the West, and it's not accepted in more conservative countries. In ancient Greece and ancient Rome, it was hardly fucking accepted. And ancient
homosexuality marriage was not accepted.
Hold on. Let me jump in this. So, Keegan, are you getting your position here based on your Christian beliefs? Is that where you're deriving this from?
Yeah, that's where my ethical framework is, yes.
Okay, so I can find the sections of the Bible that reference this stuff, which, by the way, one of them comes from Leviticus, which was a book from a religion that predates the religion that you practice. There might even be a different, perhaps I would argue, a more important interpretation that would be given by the people that the first 5 books of what you would refer to as the Bible. So when you look in, let's say, Leviticus, for example, I think 1822 would support your claim that God finds homosexuality to be detestable and that it would be against the laws, right? These moral laws. But however, in Leviticus, the same book that you would get this law from, it also forbids you from wearing clothing that's woven from 2 different types of cloth. And I'm just kind of curious, as I look at your photograph, I'm looking at this clothes now, and I'm not an expert, but I will take that image and I'll run it through an AI program.
You don't need to, Roger.
No, hold on.
It is too different. It is too.
So here's the thing. If sin is sin and your desire is to not sin, I would make the argument that you wearing cotton polyester t-shirts is just as bad in God's eyes as homosexuality.
Well, two things. Number one is there is, and I've heard Jews also discuss this, which is there's something called natural law compared to your law. But we're not under the same standards of what Leviticus has taught.
Then why would you hold on?
Because Romans says that sexual depravity includes homosexuality, and this is taught in every single major Christian church. And that verse is not. It hasn't been.
Got it. Well, but you're aware of what Jesus said in order to get to heaven, what you have to do, right?
Yeah, I do.
Being against gay people?
No, actually, what Christ said was, Christ said, if you want eternal life, you simply just have to love people and you have to love God. And I don't see it.
Where did you? I'm so sorry. What? That's not what it says.
Well,
don't take my position to lie on it.
Well, hold on. First of all, I will read it to you, since clearly you're unfamiliar. I would make this prediction here. I would bet and I don't know how you spend your time, but considering you spend so much of your time obsessing about gays, I would imagine that you probably don't read your Bible as much as I've read your Bible. And so I will happily read it to you if you're unfamiliar with this text.
Yes, please read it.
Let me go grab your Christian Bible and read to you what you don't understand. Let me go grab it.
Keegan, I think you're a prime example of why we need stricter separations of church and state. Prime example.
Well, sure, but and you can make that case, of course, but just so everyone knows, while he gets it, I know my verses. John 14:6, the most famous verse, everyone should know this. I am the way, the truth, the life. No one comes to the Father except through me, Jesus. That's how you get to heaven. If you confess with your mouth the Lord Jesus and believe in your heart that God has raised him from the dead, you will be saved. That's the only requirement to get to heaven, is believing in Jesus Christ, that he died and rose again, and that he was the Messiah. That's all it takes. It's not loving God, it's not loving others. All it takes is that you have to believe in Jesus Christ.
Are you familiar with Matthew 22:36-40?
I am.
Okay, so I'll read it to you. I'll read it aloud for the room that doesn't read the Bible. Teacher, which of these great commandment in your law? And he said to him, you shall love your Lord, your God, with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your mind. This is the great and first commandment. And a second is like it. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. On these two commandments depend all the law and the prophets. So what he's instructed is those are the two things that you must do.
No, that had nothing to do with salvation. That's what you get wrong. Those are commandments that we're called to follow. It has nothing to do with your salvation. Which you made a claim it did.
And I'll back it up here in a second. But here's my question for you, because there's a certain brand of Christianity that seems to be obsessed with sexual orientation, specifically homosexuality. If you were to run the entire Bible through AI and say, hey, what does God tell you the most to not do? And I'm guessing you don't know this because homosexuality is referenced 3 times in the Bible. 3 times. A lot of books, a lot of stuff. The number one thing that he talks about is, what the Bible talks about, is that you shouldn't be angry. Right, and this anger and this discrimination that people have towards people that choose a particular lifestyle that you don't want, the obsession on this. If you were to read your Bible, if you were to listen to what Jesus says is most important, then you would just focus on loving people and not trying to take their rights.
Do you think if Jesus was alive, let me just ask this question for you. If you think Jesus was alive, and of course he would not do this because he did not come to be the king of the king in the way that we see a king. But let's say if Jesus was alive, do you think that he would agree with the statement that gays should be able to adopt? You think so?
Yep.
You guys think Jesus would?
Yes, 100%.
Well, hold on. I did. Here's the thing that I would point out is that when Jesus was asked what's the most important thing, and he says to love God and to love people, I think what he would do is he would pull all of the people aside that obsess on discriminating against people that happen to be homosexual and say, hey, I'm not caught up on this issue. Why are you so caught up on this issue?
That's a good answer.
I mean, I think he was caught up on that issue. Doesn't it, like, specifically say that marriage between a man and a woman?
Not in the Old Testament. I mean, not exactly.
I'm not very familiar with any religion, but I thought that's what
In antiquity, men had sex with other men all the time, and nobody had a concept of homosexuality the way that we conceive of it today. It was like a normal part of certain kinds of cultures. Marshall mentioned the Greeks, and that's how to understand Leviticus. Leviticus is saying don't upend the social structure. It doesn't say don't be gay.
Well, let me ask you this, Keegan. Would you advocate for restricting the rights of people that have done other quote unquote sexually immoral acts? So let's say if somebody, let's say a couple were together and they had
Let's say the president. Let's say the president.
Let's say a couple had sex prior to their marriage. They then get married, and then they go and they fill out adoption paperwork. Are you going to then say that this heterosexual married couple that was sexually immoral by having sex before marriage, would you then hold the standard that they should not be able to adopt?
No, again, not based off of the standard. Again, my standard of for adoption is again just mainly based off of what a mother is. But ethically, if I was living like a theocracy, right? I was living in we were under a priesthood. I would say that they would have to confess that they've repented for these sins. But I mean, we don't live under that, so now I don't have an ethical problem. Or a legality problem with it. So, but what's really interesting about the way that Christianity is spoken about, which is that the number one thing, right? We have to remember, one of my favorite stories of Jesus was when he confronted the woman who was about to be stoned to death for committing adultery, and when the men came to stone, he said, "Okay, whoever has committed no sin, throw the first stone." Right? The woman's facing death. He's like, "You all have done some of the worst things as well. Like let us not judge thee and put her to death for this." Right? Even though again this was based off of Judaic law. And he said, "No, we're not going to stone her." And they decided not to stone her. And so he sits there and he keeps writing what he was writing in the sand. And he turns to the woman and he says, "Now go and sin no more." Right? I think that people forget the religion that Christianity believes in, which is that I love gay people. I truly do. I know that maybe you guys don't think I do. I love them. But again, I'm not going to advocate for anyone to be living in sin. And what I believe that they are doing is sinful. Again, based off of Romans, based off of Galatians, and sure, you can also say Leviticus, but I understand that you want to make the basis of it's Judaic law versus natural law, what that is. But yeah, that's all I want to say.
So did we solve this? Did we get to an answer here? If the question of the room is sexual orientation determined at birth, anybody want to talk about that?
Yeah, I don't think we got an answer to that.
I didn't want to be in the center of the
question.
room.
What we got is an illustration of, depending on where you fall on the answer, the implications of that, right? And I think folks who think like Keegan want to say that, and my guess is Keegan thinks it is determined. It's going to have these restrictions. Keegan, you can answer. If you're going to have these restrictions, then it sounds like you think it is determined at birth. And that's why what gives you the right to actually make those restrictions, right? But if it's a choice, you could pray the gay away, right?
Exactly, you could pray it away. It's not determined at birth.
But you think it's not determined at birth?
You can pull the gay.
Right. I mean, pray the gay away is abuse, but
sure. We gotta open up the camps. Which we started out was so detrimental, right? With pretty much people with the gay children together, but just
Democrats fucking chemtrails.
I think the irony will be when you have a gay kid and they want to adopt somebody.
Is that a threat?
It's not a threat. I think that would be a delicious irony for your life.
Yeah.
Yeah, Keegan, how would you handle that if your child, male or female, came to you and said, "Hey, I'm gay"? What would you say to your child?
I would. I mean, I would tell them I love them. And they would probably already know. And I would teach them that I believe it's wrong, and so I would say that I believe that you're wrong. You're living in sin. Probably treat them like someone who is going through like drug abuse or going through alcoholism. Just something that it's very, very sad. And I probably wouldn't want you around my household, but I love you. And whenever you want to get coffee or you want to go out and go do something, like I'm here with you as a father, but I'm against what you're doing. I wouldn't go to the wedding. Support it and show them that I'm for the union.
Keegan, what would you say is the most repetitious sin that you commit?
Probably either lying or envy. Very envious of others at times. Lying, of course, just small white lies here and there.
What do you think the God that you pray to thinks about your sin?
He hates it. He's all sin. Luckily, he's a forgiving and graceful God, and I repent almost daily.
Do you think that he thinks of your sin the same way that he thinks of other sins that you're not?
Without a doubt. But again, my sin is repented. Like your sin is not repented. That's why you would be damned to heaven while I wouldn't be, right? Because I had repented sin. That's the difference.
Well, to repent is not just to confess. You have to actually turn away from it. Are you suggesting that you're no longer going to lie?
Without a doubt. If you think that my will is to lie deliberately, again, I don't lie deliberately. If that's what you're asking. I don't. But white lies tend to happen, and those are the ones that have to be dealt with. Paul even talks about this. That I'm a man who repents and doesn't want to deliberately sin, but I still do. Why am I a fallen man? This is the great depravity that we must deal with.
So what do you think is worse? Adults making consensual decisions to have sex with each other, or the act of deceiving people through falsehoods, otherwise known as lies?
Again, through the eyes of a Christian framework, every single sin's the same.
Got it.
But I mean, but I'll tell you this: I would probably say that deceiving someone, in my eyes, just maybe as a person, I would say is more wrong. But then I would also say that gays are lying to themselves. So I could make a even bigger argument that they're living in two existences.
What lie are they telling?
That they're not committing sin. I guess you could have gay persons like, I'm committing sin, but I don't care. Which then just...
Well, it would only matter if the person accepted your framework of ethics, right?
Yeah, but then they're rejecting God, which is the, without doubt, way worse than lying. Rejecting God.
So is homosexuality as wrong as telling a lie?
Say that, I'm so sorry. Yeah, but fast.
I ask if homosexuality is wrong as telling a lie. It's the same thing.
Based on the framework of God, yes. God would see it as the same law.
Well, that's a biblical view.
Yeah. I mean, you can blame it, but...
Well, sure. If they were, I look from a Christian standpoint, in my best understanding, right? The law doesn't matter. You don't have to observe the law, right? That would include all the laws, right? There is no obligation in the 613 commandments for Christians. So I find your position to be splitting that, too clever to be useful. Some of the laws are here, they're not the ritual ones, not the ethical ones, blah, blah, blah. You want to make these kinds of distinctions that the Old Testament itself doesn't make, right? And just to put it on the nose, right? There is no passage in the Hebrew Bible that says lying is an abomination. It does say that about male sex. So I think you'd have to do a lot of gymnastics to try to figure out that lying and gay sex is the same kind of sex.
And furthermore, you have more heterosexual couples living in sin. How many heterosexual couples are out there engaging in premarital sex, having babies before marriage? I mean, if it goes without saying, sure, I don't know any verse in the Bible where Jesus directly addresses homosexuality, but I know there are verses where he talks about the man and the woman's role as husband and wife and procreating, right? And, throughout time, we see a lot of straight couples, who are so-called Christians, don't adhere to what Jesus in the Bible expects of them or commands of them. We live in sin by fornicating, having multiple partners. Spreading STDs, I wouldn't call it a sin, but you're certainly not honoring your body and the bodies of others when you're having unprotected sex. So, who's really sinful here, right? I dare say that most straight people who condemn homosexuals are probably living in sin. They're probably having premarital sex and having babies out of wedlock.
Mojo, great topic.
Yeah, that's what I do. So, Anne, what's your take? Is sexual orientation determined at birth?
I'm eating. I'm listening very carefully.
Interesting. I think that we should be careful when we lean on religion to help reinforce our worldview in a way that we want other people to act. It's my understanding, and again, I'm not a Christian, I'm not a Jew, I'm certainly not a Muslim, not after what I've learned about their prophet, but even even if I practiced any of these religions, it would be a personal relationship between me and God, which, by the way, I believe in a God. I just don't make truth claims like some of you guys do. And maybe you guys are in such good communication that you know what God wants out of you. Maybe that's true. I won't argue that. But I can't understand why anybody would then take that personal relationship that they have with God and then try to project that what other people should do. I would imagine that the God that creates the universe and creates the people in it and creates the order in which things relate with one another, I've yet to see any text that would be useful to say that you should worry about other people rather than worrying about yourself. In fact, it seems like the one thing that these things all have in common is that A, God exists, and B, God loves you, and C, God wants a relationship with you. That's what it seems to happen. But there's a lot of people that tend to then take their personal relationship and then say, I am going to go judge others based on my belief. And I think that's a huge fucking problem. I think that's a huge fucking problem. I think that when you see it to its extreme, it plays out that you will literally kill people that don't believe what you believe. And I think we should be very, very careful with taking our beliefs to a place where you want to hold other people accountable for your belief system. If you don't want to do the things that your biblical text tells you that God would be irritated with, then don't do those things. That's your choice. In fact, any of those things, if you decide that you want to follow the law and you want to not wear polyester shirts because you think that would be pleasing to God, then do that. But I don't see anybody advocating for laws that say that we should outlaw cotton polyester shirts because we know how God feels about that. Nobody's doing that. What they're doing is they're picking the sins that they don't themselves participate in, and they're saying those are the ones that we should worry about. It's very
Don't be suspicious. Don't be suspicious.
Well, and if anyone else wants to go, I can interact with
Hi, Kig.
Hey, Ann. If no one else wants to, I don't. This is Roger's room. I feel like I've said this too much, but I do disagree with Roger. It's been fun.
Well, I think the fact that people are pushing back on the things that you're saying creates the necessity for you to be able to respond, and I don't typically like to center the type of things that you're saying, but we're all guilty of criticizing your take, and so back and forth is justified.
Sounds good. So I actually believe, as a Christian, I am to worry about others, and this is based off of both. I think actually every single Christian, we even have a denomination, evangelical Christians, evangelizing to others, and I believe that we're called. I think it's Philippians 2, which is that let each of you look like out for just not your own interests, but the interests of others, which is, again, this is like the idea of compassion, care, service, empathy. And again, if I have compassion for someone, I'm gonna, and if they're again living in sin based off my framework, of course I would want to call them out with love. Of course, I think like the whole preaching on the street, telling everyone you're gonna burn in hell if you keep living this way is not loving. I don't think it brings anyone further to Christ. But again, I want to advocate for a federal system that would legalize sinful behavior. But also, there's also the Galatians, I think 6 talks about bearing others' burdens as your own. And so that's another really, really deep, complex thought, which is that the burden that Roger is going through should be the burden that I go through. But again, this is a Christian framework that I think it can, in a way, coexist with a non-religious society. And again, this is probably a deeper conversation that we've gone off the rails on. But I feel like when we talk about sexual orientation, it ends up being this way because usually the people who are against same sex is usually religious people, and usually stemming from two religions, but Muslims don't debate on this app.
So let me ask you this: in Muslims do debate. They were on the app last night. We were talking about the Prophet Muhammad and yeah. Anyways, I don't know. Are you familiar with James 4, 11 and 12?
I mean, most likely. I can't think of the verse on top of my head.
Yeah. Well, let me read it, and we'll see if we get anybody's thoughts on this. It says, "Brothers and sisters, do not slander one another. Anyone who speaks against a brother or sister or judges them speaks against the law and judges it. There is only one lawgiver and judge, the one who is able to save and destroy. But you, who are you to judge your neighbor?"
Yes, slandering, just so everyone understands, so they can get the full context. Slandering is speaking false or damning words to another with the intent of harming their reputation.
Do you believe that God wants you to be judging?
We're judging on the basis of slander.
Can you point me to a verse where he's transferred his ability to judge people to you, where he's handed that authority?
Yeah, I mean, there's something called righteous judgment in Christianity, which actually, like, the whole idea of, like, first of all, we make judgment decisions every single day. So I guess, like, I mean, I judge whether or not I'm going to wear tennis shoes or boots to work, right? It's pretty hot today, I wear tennis shoes. That was a judgment call. Good judgment call, by the way, as I should say. But there's something called righteous judgment, which is, like, making decisions. And this is John 7, I think 20 or 24.
Yeah.
Like, do not judge according to appearance, but judge with righteous judgment.
Yeah. And again, people can pick and choose. It's a big book. Why don't you speak to this one? Romans 14, 10 through 13. Then why do you judge your brother and sister, or why do you treat them with contempt? For we will all stand before God's judgment seat. Therefore, let us stop passing judgment on one another. Instead, make up your mind not to put any stumbling blocks or obstacles in the way of a brother or sister. So it very clearly says, stop passing judgment. Why would you then deny that the Bible instructs you to stop judging?
I was on mute. Yeah, again, we pass judgment on everyone. These are good judgments and righteous judgments. We are called to righteously judge. I understand that you're pointing that, again, by condemning someone with contempt. These are like with slander, with contempt. These are, you're judging with a sinful nature upon it. Righteous judgment is based on truth, with humility and honesty, and then corrects with love, and it's fear-led, and it's supposed to be fair. That's righteous judgment.
So you're suggesting that you believe that the Christian Bible calls on people to judge and not God? Because I could read to you at least 7 times in the Bible where it says that God is supposed to judge.
Again, the two ones that you stated were incorrect ways on how to judge. with slander, with contempt, right? I'm saying
I'm gonna read several of these, and I want you to find the through line in all of these things. Matthew 7:1-2. Do not judge, or you too will be judged. For the same way you judge others, you will be judged, and with the measure you use, it will be measured to you. Okay, that's number one. Luke 6:37. Do not judge, and you will not be judged. Do not condemn, and you will not be condemned. Forgive, and you will be forgiven. John 8:7. Let anyone who is without sin be the first to throw a stone at her. Romans 14:10-13. I already read to you there, and I already read to you James 4:11 and 12. Those are 5 separate scriptures. I can reread those if you guys needed me to. Those are 5 separate scriptures that are commanding you to not judge others.
Yeah, all right, and I'll explain this to both Roger and I throughout the room. This is how Christians are told to judge, not to judge. There's hypocritically, which is Matthew 7:1, which is a hypocritical judge. There's then condemning someone's heart or their eternity, telling someone that they will not be into the kingdom of heaven. That's James 4:11. But then there's judgment that we're supposed to discern truth from error, which is John 7. Again, what I read 20 something, which is do not judge according to appearance, but judge with a righteous judgment. And then there's Galatians 6, which is the correct of others believer. To other believers, which is a man has overtaken in any trespass. You who are spiritually restored, such one a spirit with gentleness. Right? This is again, Christians are responsible to lovely correct the individual, the fellow believer. And then the third one, which goes on back with you guys, which is protecting the church. This is another judgment that we're called to do. For what I've done is with judgment of also who are the outside. Do not judge those who are on the inside. This is Paul commanding the Corinthians to judge some from the church. So we have 3 different types of judgment that we're called to do. We have 2 different types of judgments that we're not called to do, which is condemning someone's eternity, meaning that whether or not they're going to make it to heaven. I can't determine that other than someone saying that they're not a believer. Then that's where you determine that's where evangelism comes into. But if someone says they're a Christian but they sin, I cannot say that they are not going to go to heaven because I do not know their heart. Hypocritically, I cannot judge someone for the sin that I commit. Because that would be hypocritical. But again, the judgment that we're all supposed to make is the one where we discern truth from error, which is a large one. And that's what I think a lot of Christians are trying to do. But sometimes not the most loving way. But that is the Christian belief, and every single pastor would agree that there's righteous judgment, non-righteous judgment. And that's why I live that.
I hear what you say, but you're definitely cherry picking the scriptures that you believe to be most important.
Write anything anti-Semitic? So can you write anything anti-Islam?
I thought he was less of a threat, maybe when it comes to like gun rights and that kind of shit. But even the gun rights stuff, they had an ample opportunity to pass the Hearing Protection Act and the Short Act, which I won't even get into what those are. But of course, that got tossed to the wayside. They just like Trump and these Republicans, they're so fucking disingenuous. They're the most.
Where's the wall?
Huh?
Where's the wall?
We have the walls largely built.
Where I live, actually, mister. Is it actually finished? I can get the wall in like 10 or 15 minutes from my house.
The walls, yeah, mostly finished. There's parts you can't build a wall because it's like literally you can't drive there.
Exactly. What do the walls look like? I mean, how are they? What are they made of?
They're probably like, I'd say a good, I don't know, 20 feet.
They're the same kinds of walls you have in Arizona, okay? They're those
they're like really
tall metal I-beams.
Yeah.
And they're like, I don't know about Arizona, but there are spaces in ours, because the wall isn't supposed to function as some sort of like medieval or Roman remnant. It's supposed to function as a funnel, which is a weird way to... Yeah, it's a weird way to think about it.
Basically, the wall, all it does is slope. Anybody who's committed to getting across the border will do it. If you're a young, fit male, there's a way you grab onto the I-beams, and then you push yourself up with your feet. And there's videos of people doing this with ease all the time. But you can also drill through it. You can or saw through it. You can do all kinds of stuff. But it's basically what? Goddamn.
You get a tunnel under it.
There's an expression. There's a lot that there's an expression that a lock only keeps an honest eye, right? If someone's determined enough, they're going to get in. But it's about slowing them down. It's about making it that little bit harder so that they maybe go funnel through an easier point, which is more patrolled and surveilled, and therefore they can conserve their resources. So, but they can build it like that's what Steve Bannon did. They built a wall where the U.S. government would, over a really elevated terrain, and so it can be built even in those worse areas. That's what the whole build the wall part was about.
No, you have like super steep, like literally, you can't. You'd have. I saw
the videos. Go look at the build the wall.
But wouldn't it be better to patrol the border with guards because people can get right?
Yeah, they're moving to mainly electronic. They're moving to largely to electronic surveillance and stuff, which is way better to begin with.
Comes in
Yeah.
With electronic surveillance, that means cameras, that means drones, that means aerostats, which are big blimps.
The problem is that policy administration can come in.
Just let me finish. They are using active border patrol, whether they be in trucks or whether they're on horses, depending on what part of the train you're on. They are utilizing walls, and they're utilizing ground-based sensors, which indicate vibrations. They're using all of that in conjunction. So it's not like they're only doing the wall. They're doing the wall plus everything else.
And one of the things
that now our policy will be that they come and go, right? A new administration coming and can kind of take away that funding. If they build a wall, it would be extremely unpalatable to the taxpayer if the new administration decided to take it down. So it will be permanent.
There's a lot of disingenuous shit. Like the one thing, I've known this for years, but you'll notice a lot of people say we need to build that wall. The fentanyl's poisoning the kids. Kids are dying. We need to build the wall. But what they don't tell you is that nearly all of the fentanyl, the cocaine, the heroin, the methamphetamine, that almost all of it comes through an official port of entry. It's literally hidden in cargo or hidden within the compartment within an automobile or a truck. That's how they bring it in. They don't do it by fucking backpacks over a goddamn wall.
I thought the majority of fentanyl came from China.
Well, the precursor chemicals, yeah. They taught the Mexicans how to make it.
Okay,
so the
gotcha.
Mexicans make it now.
Okay.
Yep. I think Keegan's a MAGA person, so we usually get along. But Keegan, what do you think of this big shitty bill?
Why do you not like this bill that's gonna have losers on their knees? What's wrong?
This is a trashy bill. I mean, it's just literally. So it's going to put us further in debt. Yet, what is it doing for Americans? Well, I mean, it's going to yank a bunch of people off of health insurance. It's going to have hospitals in rural areas, which are very needed. We've already had a problem with a lot of them shutting down. These are going to go. You're probably going to lose more rural health care. And for what? We're spending more money for this. And you had Trump in his serving the drive-through at McDonald's and driving a garbage truck, basically saying, oh, I care about you everyday Americans, basically poor Americans. And look what he did to them.
Is it slowing the growth of the debt?
No, I don't think so.
Not that I didn't see
I don't think so, Norm. I think it's spending more money. I thought that was the contention of this bill. It's spending.
Everybody spends more money, but there's a rate and there's a net amount. So if the rate is slow, that could be seen as a small victory.
Well, okay, so what I've gotten from it, number one, is that it's introducing new deductions, which I'm in favor of. It limits taxes on tips. Overtime, I get overtime, so I'm pretty excited. It grants $6,000 for older adults, and also increases for children, auto loans, and
So those things I think are good. I'm excited that it's going to give $400 billion to Border Patrol and constructing 700 miles of the new border wall. But then this is where I've also seen, which I'm wondering where we're going to gain a bunch of money. Because maybe I'm reading the bill wrong. I thought we're actually going to get more money back into our, we're going to have less.
No, it expends more money than it takes in.
Well, I thought that it's cutting $1.2 trillion from Medicaid SNAP programs.
Over about.
And you want to do that?
Over about a 10-year period. So it's not going to happen immediately.
Well, see, that's the kind of the thing I have a problem with, Keegan, is that at the end of the day, the people who would receive, for example, Medicaid, your life is, it's already hard enough if you're even on Medicaid to begin with. And so why are you just made their life that much harder?
Well, I don't know why you're saying that. I saw that they're giving $50 billion for the next 5 years to oil,
Keegan, how are you defending?
That's only gonna slow down the bleeding, because you're gonna have basically that's gonna be given to the hospitals, because obviously once Medicaid people are off of Medicaid, they're going to the hospitals aren't going to be making as much money, and we've already have a problem with rural hospitals having to close. But what it does, that $50 billion doesn't do, is it doesn't give the poor people health care so that they can get their medications, so that they can have any kind of preventative care, so that they can, and Medicaid covers super basic shit. It's not. I don't know.
I think Medicaid. Well, I think the reason why a lot of people are upset with Medicaid is that it's been exploited, right? It's costing taxpayers. It's costing taxpayers over $50 billion a year on illegal immigrants.
No, that's false. Because
It's not true.
No, I can tell you it's not. No, you got it wrong. You got it. You're talking to somebody who worked in hospitals even over 20 years ago. You're correct. There was. In Arizona, we had the Medicaid. It's called Access, and they're these white insurance cards. Now, illegal immigrants, they would have a bright yellow Access card, and that was basically just showed that it was purely federally funded, and it's to be used only at an emergency room. And part of the reason why they do that is because emergency rooms. It can't refuse treatment if you present with symptoms. So basically, it was making it so that the hospitals and the community weren't having to eat the cost of these illegal immigrants seeking health care. But at the end of the day, that's not really solving anything. It's just going to pass the financial burden on to hospitals. Now, if you're gonna actually solve the fucking problem, you start at the root, which is okay, you have way too many undocumented immigrants doing this shit.
Yeah. Keegan, just one second. Sorry.
No, the bill cuts Medicaid for Americans.
Dean, we don't allow immigrants.
Hold on, Dean. No, let Dean go.
Yeah, just want to provide some slow stats here, but looking here is that for one, Medicaid is you can't file for Medicaid as an undocumented immigrant, so the immigrants are not eligible for Medicaid. However, there's emergency Medicaid spending which undocumented immigrants can receive, but this is only a small fraction of overall Medicaid spending. Looking at from 2023 data, only 0.4% of total Medicaid spending went towards emergency care for undocumented immigrants, which amounts to roughly $3.8 billion out of $900 billion in total spending. So there is a cost there, but it's about 0.5% of overall Medicaid spending goes to undocumented immigrants for emergency-related care.
That's correct. You can't enroll in Medicaid without a Social Security card, a Social Security number. So an undocumented person they don't have that. And even if
they can get that
oh God. This is the thing. they have to, have you ever applied for Medicaid? Because I have. You have to furnish the social security card, and then what's on your social security card has to match what's also on your driver's license. Remember, now we have real IDs, so I don't know how these people are. I don't know how they're going to go and get, because you have to show proof of who you are when you apply for Medicaid. So you have to have a social security card in your name. You have to have a driver's license in your name. Sometimes they even ask for a birth certificate. And I've been asked to turn that in when I had Medicaid because I lost my insurance. I got laid off and I got a new job later and got employer paid insurance. But it's really difficult if you don't have a social to apply for Medicaid. I don't understand. Like they're gonna check, and then you have to have like a bill or some type of
It's just
no, you can't.
He just told you. Hold on, let me finish. He just told you it's only 0.4%. The rest of the people on Medicaid are U.S. citizens. So what are you?
Okay. 0.4 was people going to the ER, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, but the thing is though, is that this bill does nothing to stop people from going to the illegals from going to the ER. Because at the end of the day, the law is that if you present yourself to an ER and you have symptoms, they have to treat you. So no matter what, somebody's going to have to foot that bill. Now obviously the hospitals are going to have to foot that bill. Which, it's going to, especially in places like Phoenix, Arizona, where I live, that can be, that's going to be pretty fucking burdensome.
Why do they?
Yeah, what we're gonna create is competitive.
Well, the law is they have to be treated.
They have to be treated, but like even without them.
Hey, immigrant! Hey, immigrant! We don't allow you to speak about this.
Keegan, why are you simping for more strength? I don't get it.
Immigrant. So, well, number one is people understand that the reason why the reason why we're no, I didn't vote for Trump. I don't like Trump. But the idea that like some of these stuff isn't a good thing, like what are we doing? But my point is that number one is this bill was going to increase spending because we were going to default on most of our loans. We had to increase our debt by $5 trillion if we weren't going to default on our loans. Like those things actually matter, and that would have happened under any president. And again, this is just because of inflation.
Keegan, who did you vote?
I didn't vote for the presidential election.
Who did you vote in your primary? Looking for Trump. That's what it is.
I mean, at the end of the day, why do we have this? And it's called big, like a big, beautiful bill. So why do we have such a big bill that puts us more in debt? And I guess there's the wealthy are gonna they'll be a little bit happy with it, but you're just gonna shit on your very large voting base, which is gonna be
how many times did I tell you the conservative
lower middle class people?
How many times did I tell you this?
No, I know conservatives are like most quote unquote conservatives are fucking retards.
The brain dead, the old brain dead.
Well, the very people that voted for this bill are going to end up losing their Medicaid and their SNAP.
I mean, I'm not down. I don't really agree with the bill, but the Medicaid argument. I mean, there's definitely people cheating the system.
Oh, God.
Spend $900 billion a year on it. I mean, you got to start to trim the fat somewhere. At least
so when you say
people and try and make them prove that they really need it.
We need to prove they need it.
When you say cheating the system, the majority of people on Medicaid are elderly, because if they don't have enough assets and they have to go into a nursing home, Medicaid pays for their care. It pays for elderly people's nursing home care. Is that correct, Pepe? And a lot of disabled people, like people with like physically disabled, mentally, like autism and all that kind of stuff. Like if you have a kid that is like mentally, Medicaid pays for their health care because they can't work. So this idea that there's all these people just running around scrounging off the system is not true. Like 60% of people on Medicaid actually work.
I just said
you're spinning this narrative. You're spinning this.
There's always
but you're spinning this narrative. Yeah, there is a little bit, but that doesn't justify kicking 7.6 million people off Medicaid that previously had it. That doesn't make sense. Yeah.
How many people are on Medicaid?
Well, it would make sense if it's saving money.
Why do you? I would like to know real quick, Pepe. I didn't hear one thing though. I want a little clarity on it. They said the energy costs are going to go up by like what, $400 a year? Can somebody that knows a little bit more about the bill explain that to me?
I'm not familiar with that in particular.
No, because that's what concerns me the most. I mean, fuck the Medicare and all that stuff. Like, it doesn't matter.
Well, what about the debt increase?
Somebody said energy costs are gonna go up by.
It doesn't matter. America prints its own money. That is not a problem. We don't
It does matter if people have to pay $400. Let me look it up.
The only thing that matters is the
No,
debt.
I'm talking about debt. The debt quantities. I get the whole 400.
Here's the two things. Here's the two things about that bill that I don't really care about much. Like okay, I don't qualify for Medicare. Neither does anybody in my family. And every time in like 9 years ago, I actually went down there to try to actually get some for me and my two kids, as a struggling fucking husband with two kids, right? And they said, fuck you. They said, I make too much money. And at that time, living in California, I'm like, what the fuck do you mean I make too much money? What, huh? Right? So I didn't respect that system to begin with. You basically had to be a leech to get anything from that place, or you had to be a finesser or some sort of a liar or bullshitter, right? Or you just had to be really broke, right? So therefore, if you were any sort of a type person, or any sort of a try to get somewhere in life, or not want to be broke for the rest of your life type of person, then you weren't going to qualify. I'm sorry. It was only for bums. I mean, it is what it is. I'm sorry, right? So as far as Medicare getting taken away from people, cool. Go to Blue Cross, Blue Shield like I had to. Let me like fuck it.
I think.
So I'm reading about it. It's saying that okay.
Real quick, I think we might be getting it mixed up. Medicare is 65 and older and certain people. Medicaid is the one for just low income. I mean,
yeah,
correct.
You can cheat the system and work under the table and get Medicaid.
Poor people no, Medicare is for the elderly. Medicare is for 65 and older. Well, the elderly also. Hold on. But people who are elderly also have Medicaid as well. Medicaid kicks in and pays for their nursing home care, pays for their.
Fuck them. That's the generation that fucked us over to begin with.
Wake that up, Uncle.
I don't give a shit about the boomers and the silent generation and Gen X. Fuck them. That's the same generation that raised us where. So I'm gonna stop saying something, right? That's the same generation that when I was in elementary school in California, my teacher in elementary school was telling me that when you guys get to retirement age, you're probably not gonna get Social Security, but you're gonna pay into it your whole life. That's the same generation that fucked me over as a millennial, so fuck them. I don't give a fuck about them if they die from whatever. No. I'll
say this. I
from their Jamaican
I don't give a shit about their fucking gout and diabetes.
Okay. So I did look it up. It says, it's projected to increase. The ratepayer bill is increasing by up to $400 annually in the next 5 years due to the bill's cuts to clean energy incentives.
What?
And then that was from the
clean energy incentives, like
Crits reported that it'd be $250 to $415 increase. So the energy prices are going to go up. Winning, amazing. America first.
There is a section in that bill specifically devoted to energy.
That is America first.
I think it's in the bottom part of the table of contents.
No, I mean, this bill's trash. It's just going to saddle. What? I mean, you think the boomers are bad? I mean, look, what the fuck is this generation doing? They're just going to saddle future generations with more fucking debt?
And then the boomers that passed the bill.
Most people in Congress.
We're getting rid of what the boomers did. I mean, at some point you have to clean this up.
What's the age of everybody in Congress? They're boomers.
How are you cleaning it up?
Most of Congress and Senate aren't boomers.
Okay, either way, they're not millennials.
Uncle, if you were born in that era, you wouldn't be like them. You'd be totally different.
You would be, Uncle.
I'd be a lot more passionate.
You would be.
I'd be more compassionate,
You wouldn't
right?
have been anything.
But the fact is, they've done nothing but fuck us over for the last like 60 years.
And if you were born at the same year as them, you'd be a lot different.
I mean, the problem is though, is I don't know, like as much as the so-called church-going conservatives love to, they're just fucking trash. So are the, I mean, and that's a really other shitty part is a lot of these so-called
so-called progressives and I don't know what the fuck you'd even call them on the left are absolutely fucking disastrous and unrealistic. They create more fucking problems than anything, but
You know what?
what we're stuck with is Trump.
One thing is that they don't increase spend as much as Trump.
I know, Trump, he's trash.
What Pepe is really itching to say, he wants to say that 99% of
No, you guys are wrong. The average age in Congress is 58 years old.
That's
younger
You do
That's not a boomer. That's not a
What the hear the boomer? Not the boomer.
No, it's not. That's
Gen
not
X.
a boomer. A boomer is born like 1950.
No,
No, a 15-year-old is a Gen X. A boomer is 74. Right.
Who cares?
It's not a lie. Google.
58 years old is a boomer, bitch.
No, it's not. No, it's not. No, it's not.
Who cares?
What you mean about Americans?
Okay, guys, I know this is my fault. This is my fault because you guys are so used to me having my racist troll spaces, and now I'm just kind of being serious. And what's really pissing me off is what I love to do is to argue with the conservatives, but they're hiding.
Maybe I would have sworn I didn't for being conservative.
I'm not a conservative. I'm a right winger. I'm not conservative.
Rabbi's gay. Rabbi's gay.
What
about Marshall? Marshall, why don't you throw Trump?
Can you deny it?
Rabbi likes to bend over
Marshall,
for
why don't you
training.
throw
All
Trump?
right, guys, this isn't one of the troll spaces. So
I'm not trolling.
I'm not a conservative. I'm really not.
Okay, fine. You're not.
Everybody on here, ask any of the conservative, anybody on conservative Clubhouse. There's a lot of overlap, but they realize that there's like key differences where I just don't agree with them.
But can you, whether you're conservative or not, can you admit that I've been telling all of you motherfuckers that MAGA is a huge scam? And that
You never told me that, so
I never told you that conservatives are actual cucks. I never told you that.
Not me.
So, Pepe, can you explain the difference between a right winger and a conservative?
I would when I say right winger, it's more how I would land, here in America. I do think if somebody would push back against a lot of the progressive policies and stuff, which I think are just divisive and a waste of time, focus, money.
You're full of shit because you did support Donald Trump.
I did. I voted for him.
You said what?
I voted